This is the first episode of the BEDROT podcast for anyone who is just tuning in and kind of doesn't know what this podcast is going to be about. It's essentially going to be a podcast where we discuss the realities of living with invisible illnesses and disabilities. It's going to happen every other Tuesday. Every podcast episode, we will be having a different topic to discuss. And I have a long list as of right now. I think I have like 40. Today, specifically, we are going to be discussing and defining exactly what an invisible illness and disability is. This is obviously more geared towards people who aren't living with them and more for the purpose of educating people who don't live with them. And then we're also going to be diving into the misconceptions that come with living with invisible illness and disability, because there's lots of them. And the first one that I had written down, I am sure that every single one of you have heard this, because if you haven't, you will very soon, I'm sure, because it happens far too much and people don't see it as this, like, I feel like people don't see this particular one as an issue, but it can be really harmful, but we're gonna get into that. It's gonna be a podcast that I do from my bed, because the whole purpose of it and the reason that it's called BEDROT is because a lot of us who are invisibly ill or disabled, we spend a lot of time in bed. So I kind of want the vibes of this podcast to be two friends who are invisibly ill, kind of discussing the realities of our experiences from the comfort of our bed. And then outside of that, yeah, just bringing awareness to anyone who's willing to listen, who is abled and healthy, who wants to learn about our experiences as invisibly ill and disabled individuals. This is going to be more of an interactive podcast. I will be keeping an eye out on comments and stuff like that. I will be answering comments from the channel redeems. I have a channel redeem on here for anyone who wants to ask a question that is specifically surrounding the topic that we're going to discuss. So if you do have a question or you have something that you want to say, feel free to use the channel redeem, and I will make sure to read it and to answer it if it is a question or whatever. I guess I should also do an introduction of myself to anyone who doesn't know who I am or if you're learning about me for the first time. My name is Punkster. I am a invisibly ill and disabled Dead by Daylight and horror content creator over here on Twitch, but I use my platform a lot to bring awareness to invisible illnesses and disabilities. I have a couple of projects, BEDROT being one of them. I have been sick since I was 9 years old. I developed ankylosing spondylitis, which is an autoimmune disease and a form of arthritis, when I was 9. And that was through genetics. There are a lot of people in my family who have it. But over the last 4 or 5, I think it's been 5 years now, I've developed other issues. I have POTS now, as well as chronic fatigue syndrome. And currently, in the state of my health, I may potentially, I'm not going to go outright and say that I do because we're still figuring out, but I may be developing a 4th one. But yeah, I have unfortunately, a lot of experience in invisible illness and disability. I've been through my own journey, and I'm sure we'll dive into what exactly I've gone through throughout all of these episodes. If you guys want to hear about my experiences specifically in an episode, I can definitely have one where I just talk about, my individual experiences with each illness, how it's affected me, how it's affected my life, like my diagnosis process and stuff like that, whatever. Just let me know. I'm going to have a sip of water because my throat is already getting sore. It's the App City over here. I'm hoping that some people who watch aren't personally chronically ill or disabled, and are just here to learn about it and keep an open mind and listen to the experiences of other people. So if you are here and you don't know what an invisible illness is, I'm going to dive into that right now. Essentially, it kind of is what it sounds like. It is something that you don't outright see. It's an illness or a disability that isn't visible to the eye. You can't really see it outwardly. I feel like a lot of people, when they think of disability or someone being sick, they automatically assume or envision someone with a mobility aid of some sort, or, like they look sick. But that's not the case most of the time, honestly. There's definitely a lot of us out there who You know, if you have a mobility aid, you can outright see, oh, okay, that person is disabled in some way. But most of the time, that's not the case, and especially with invisible illnesses. But not all disabilities can be seen. An invisible illness or disability is a condition that impacts a person's life significantly, but isn't immediately apparent to others. This can include chronic illnesses such as lupus, fibromyalgia, Crohn's disease, arthritis, multiple sclerosis, ulcerative colitis. There are a lot of other chronic illnesses that fall under the invisible illness umbrella. This also includes mental health conditions, which I feel like most people, or in my personal experience, I've seen a lot of people with mental health conditions feel like they aren't like disabled because of it, or they aren't invisibly ill. Conditions like depression, anxiety, PTSD, or even neurological disorders like ADHD or autism can be considered invisible because they don't present themselves in an obvious way. So if you yourself deal with either mental health or neurological disorder, I know it's really easy for anyone who deals with those to kind of gaslight themselves and feel like they aren't that sick or they aren't disabled. I actually know a few people personally who live with ADHD and they don't see themselves as disabled or invisibly ill. It's not that they believe that they aren't. It's just that honestly, anyone who lives with an invisible illness or disability, we have a tendency to kind of, we've developed an ableist mindset, and because of the society that we live in, and it's really hard to break out of that mindset because that's all we've known as we've grown up, and from the people around us. We live in a very ableist society, so it's easy to pick up the ableist mindsets that other people have. And so when me personally, when I first started getting sick, I definitely had the mindset of like, I'm not sick enough, I'm not disabled enough. And obviously there is no such thing. You're either disabled or you're not. You either have an invisible illness or you don't. Like, there is no such thing. It's a spectrum. There's no such thing as not being sick enough, not being disabled enough. And so that's very much like an ableist mindset of you have to be sick to a certain point, or you have to be disabled to a certain point. And that's why we have an internal ableism that we have to kind of unpack and see from a different perspective and break out of that mindset, because internalized ableism, which we will probably talk about in another episode, is a very real thing that so many of us, even myself to this day, there are moments where I experience it. But there are a lot of us who live with something that's it's the same thing. Like, I just use the term disabilities because it doesn't matter if you have a dynamic disability or not, you're still disabled. But if you're being specific about that state of being disabled, like me personally, you could define what I have as a dynamic disability because my symptoms differ from day to day. There's days where I use my mobility aid, there's days where I don't need it at all. Like, it really depends on how my symptoms are that day. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's essentially what a dynamic disability is and what that means as well. And in living with these, just as we were talking about, because of naturally how ableist society is, there are a lot of misconceptions that come with living with an invisible illness or disability. And the first one, it is probably the most heard misconception and comment that you will hear. I just heard this, not personally, but someone said this to Mr. Punkster about 2 weeks ago, I would say, and that is, you don't look sick. Man, oh man. If I had to take a shot for every single time I heard this specific comment, I would probably be hospitalized from like overconsumption of alcohol. This is definitely one of the most common phrases people with invisible illnesses or disabilities hear, because it's rooted in the assumption that someone must have visible symptoms to be truly considered sick. The thought of, because you don't look sick, you must not be sick. But looks can be deceiving. We all know this. Someone might appear perfectly healthy while internally dealing with pain, fatigue, or other disabling symptoms. And this misunderstanding often leads to invalidation, making people feel like they need to prove their illness to be taken seriously. And again, that also goes hand in hand with internalized ableism. And that's why a lot of us have internalized ableism, is because we hear comments like this. Like I said, just the other week, Mr. Punkster heard this from someone that he works with. It was because I had gone in with him on a day off, of like one of his days off. And he told me, oh, come in and say hi. And I was really nervous, and I get a lot of anxiety when I see either his coworkers or like family members when I have my makeup done and stuff, because I feel like they are observing me and like I'm being watched and like judged, and like they're silently picking me apart. So I was like, okay, like I will, because I love him and I'll support him. And, he wants me to go in and say hi. So like, I'm gonna go in and say hi. But my mouth immediately started drying up. Like I was already getting so much anxiety, because just something in me knew that the second I go in there, they're gonna see me all prettied up, and they're just gonna be like, oh, but like I thought she was sick, because this happens all of the time. So I go in, I'm being my bubbly self, because that's who I am. Doesn't matter if I'm having a shitty day or not. Doesn't matter if I feel like my illness is like really bothering me or not. I'm still the bubbly person that I am. I might be a little more tired, but I still laugh and I smile the whole time, and I'm very pleasant, because that's just who I am when I talk to people. And so we have this conversation, we leave, and then weeks later, Mr. Punkster goes to work, and he says something, his boss says something like, she didn't look that sick, and basically like telling him, like, assume that like it's basically when people say things like this, I don't think they outright think that it's a harmful comment, or that they're basically not believing the disabled person's experience. They just think, oh, well, like, she looks fine, so like maybe she's not as bad, maybe she just needs to do this, this, and this. But it is such a harmful comment, because the second you hear it, it's not just the comment, it is what they are doing is they aren't believing you. They think you're lying. They think that you're over exaggerating, and that's the furthest thing from the truth. Like, I was struggling that day. He didn't see that the second we left that conversation and I got back in the car, that I had my eyes closed and my head against the window, because my fatigue was so bad. But if I know I'm gonna have a short conversation with someone, I pull myself together a little bit, because I don't want to sit there and be miserable the whole time. Nobody wants to talk to someone who's super miserable. Like, I want it to be a good exchanging conversation. So if I'm going to talk to someone for 5 minutes, like, I'm going to be pleasant. I'm going to not be like eyes rolling to the back of my head, like slouching. Like, I'm going to just try to be as pleasant and nice as I possibly can. And then the second I go away, like, I'm going to die. Like, I'm literally going to go back to rotting and unmasking, because that's basically what you do. And I feel like, actually, thank you, puns, that was exactly what I was going to say, is a lot of us mask when we go out and we're grabbing groceries, or going to family events. I mask a lot when I go to family events, because I only see them so often, because me personally, I'm homebound, and because my conditions affect me so greatly, I say no to things a lot. And I know a lot of you understand that as well, and probably do the same thing. So when it's Christmas time, and I finally see them after it's been months of not seeing them, I mask, because I'm trying to get out of my own experience and just try to feel normal for even a second. And so masking isn't always for the benefit of other people. It's also because you're just trying to get out of your own experience for even just a second. People will act weird if you're visibly unwell and can't be presentable, and then people still act weird when you make an effort to feel exactly, you can't win. You can never win. If you look sick, you've given up on yourself. If you don't look sick, you're not sick enough and you must be faking. There's never any winning in this situation. So that's the biggest misconception for sure. That's definitely the most common one. And there is so much to unpack in that comment alone, because again, it's not just simply a misconception. It is outright not believing a disabled person's experience. The second misconception, which is kind of the same thing, but it's a little different, and that is them saying it must not be bad if you're still doing whatever. Like, it must not be bad if you were able to get up and grab groceries today. It must not be that bad because you put on makeup and you decided to stream today. So you must not be doing that bad, right? That's also a big misconception, and again, couldn't be farther from the truth. People with invisible illnesses often find ways to manage their symptoms so that they can continue working, studying, socializing, whatever it may be. But just because someone is capable of certain activities doesn't mean their condition isn't impacting them. It's a balancing act, one that often comes at the cost of having to rest for days afterwards or sacrificing other aspects of their lives. So for me personally, and I've said this to you guys before, I sacrifice a lot to be able to show up and do these things. I BEDROT most of the time so that I can be here and show up. You know, if I know that I have a family event coming up that I have to attend, I'm saying no to things. I'm not, like, Mr. Punkster and I don't really go on dates anymore because, like, I have to show up and work. I have to make a living somehow. I have income that I need to make, and so I can pay the bills. Like, everything comes at a cost. Just because you see us doing something doesn't mean that that's something we can do all the time, and doesn't mean that that's something that we even should be doing. A lot of times, if you see us doing something, we don't have a choice. Like going out and getting groceries. Like, I go to the doctor's appointments. Like, sometimes I don't want to go to that doctor's appointment. I'm not feeling well. I would rather be in bed, but sometimes you just have to do things. The whole premise is that it's an invisible illness. You're not going to see how fatigued I am most of the time, other than the bags under my eyes, but you can't really see them right now. I have makeup and lighting and stuff, but I swear I have, like, the double bag. I got double baggage going on, you know what I'm saying? But even then, like, people just look and they're like, oh, you're a little tired. They'll chime it up to, you just didn't sleep well. They don't feel like the bone, like the utter cement that you feel like you have inside you because of how bad and debilitating your fatigue is. They don't feel the pain in your bones, in your joints. They don't feel the throbbing or the burning sensation that you feel with pain. They don't feel how, like, if you experience pain in your hips like I do, like if you go up the stairs or anything, or if you move it to a certain point, they don't feel the pain. They don't feel anything. They cannot feel what you are feeling. So to assume that you can chime it up to them visually seeing you doing something and seeing you doing that thing and assuming that that's something that you do all the time, like, it all comes down to the fact that people lack an open mind. It's very easy for people to just jump to conclusions after seeing one single thing. And I can't personally understand how hard it can be to just take a second and observe and think to yourself, okay, but, like, do I see them 24 hours a day? No. If you don't know this person, like, personally, if you don't know them, like, and, like, even actually, I would even argue, if you don't live with this person, I don't think you fully know them. Because, like, my family, they know me well, but I would argue that the person who sees me struggling the most is my fiance. He sees everything. He sees exactly what I go through. Family can only see so much because they see me when I want to be seen. But yeah, it's an incredibly frustrating comment for people to say that. And even if they don't outwardly say it, just that mindset can be really, really harmful. Because again, there's times where we are sacrificing things to be able to do that thing, or we are doing the thing because we don't have a choice. And a lot of the experience of living with an invisible illness or disability is give and take and sacrifices and saying no to the things that you want to do so that you do the things that you have to do. Because there are even things that we do that we have to do that sometimes we have to say no to. You know what I mean? I can go out and get groceries, but there's still a chance that I'll be in pain afterwards, and that's on top of needing time to decompress and recharge from being out in public. That too, yes. Not only are you sacrificing things before so that you're able to do those things, you're sacrificing afterwards. You're paying for it afterwards. And again, that's the whole thing, is that people don't see that. They don't see that after you are doing that thing, if you go out with friends for an hour, if you go grocery shopping, if you go to that family event, they don't see that you might be in bed for the rest of the day, the rest of the week. If you're like someone like me who has chronic fatigue syndrome, like I've been bedridden for weeks on end. Things always come at a cost for us. The third misconception, which is also another big one, honestly, I feel like a lot of these, it's kind of sad now that I'm thinking about it. Every time I mention one of these, I say it's a big one. And I think it's just because people have a lot of misconceptions about us. Like, and it's like that's all our experience is people not believing us, or feeling like they're owed an opinion, or that they're allowed to have an opinion when they don't. Moral of the story, people just need to shut the fuck up, quite frankly. That's it. That's it. End of the podcast. Thank you for watching. Just shut the fuck up. That's it. No. The third one is the myth of laziness or exaggeration, which is partly what we were kind of just touching upon. But we're also kind of going to kind of dive into people assuming that we're lazy. Many invisible illnesses come with fluctuating symptoms. Again, that ties into what we were talking about what a dynamic disability is. That's basically what it is fluctuating symptoms. One day you can do something, the next day you can't. Some days might be manageable while others feel unbearable. This inconsistency can lead to assumptions that someone is faking or lazy when they aren't able to function as expected. In reality, it's the illness that dictates these fluctuations, not the person's willpower. People assume that we are able to function to a certain point. There are a lot of times where I feel like I can barely function. I would argue that most of the time I feel like I can barely function. And it has nothing to do with who I am as a person. I personally am a very driven individual. I was very driven before I got sick. I'm still driven, but the difference between pre-getting sick and post-getting sick is I was able to live up to those standards, those personal standards, before I got sick. Now, I'm still a driven person. I have all of these goals that I have, but I'm not able to meet them anymore. Or it looks very different to me now, and I have to slowly chip away at it. I can't just go full tilt into my dreams and my passions. It's the same thing as what we were just discussing, where everything comes at a cost. Like, I'm able to do these things, but I am not able to do them the way that I did before. And so when people see us laying in bed after working or like in between doing things, they assume you're just lazy, when in reality, we're greatly struggling. And the thing with living with an invisible illness or disability is, with experience, like anything in life, with experience, you get very good at, managing it. I've been sick since I was 9, and there are times where I'm in so much pain, but nobody could tell. Nobody could tell, because we are forced to manage. We are forced to live our lives the way that able-bodied and healthy people do, and still just have to go out and do those things. And, like, not really... Where am I going with this? Brain fog. Oh, no. The thought just left. The thought signed out. The thought just completely signed out. It is gone. It is long gone. I'm so sorry. This is gonna happen a lot. I don't even remember what the thought was anymore. It's gone. Like, I don't know what I was trying to say, but it's gone. So unfortunately, we just have to move on. People don't understand the difference between being tired and exhaustion. Oh, yeah. We will have an episode, I think, just dedicated to fatigue, because there are a lot of things to unpack when it comes to fatigue. One of them being misconceptions, but it's also, I want to discuss, like, coping strategies and stuff. Obviously, it's not foolproof, because, I mean, there's days where it doesn't matter how you cope, like, it just is what it is. But I definitely want to do one specifically for fatigue, because chronic fatigue and being tired, two entirely different things. The final misconception is the stigma around mental health conditions. And again, we briefly touched upon this at the very beginning. I feel like there are a lot of people with mental health struggles that really struggle with internalized ableism and not believing that they have an invisible illness or are disabled, because of the way that society views mental illness. So, mental health conditions are often labeled as being all in your head, which a lot of people say, which can be incredibly harmful. Depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions are as real as any physical illness, and dismissing them contributes to the stigma and can prevent people from seeking the help that they need. And it's because people don't take them seriously. And mind you, a lot of people don't take invisible illnesses, like physical invisible illnesses, seriously either. But mental health conditions are very different. Yes, they're still invisible illnesses, but they are very different. And it's because it's all in your head that people don't see it as legit. They don't see it as a legit illness or disability. I feel like the biggest thing is that there are people who live with an anxiety disorder, and then there's people who experience anxiety. You can experience anxiety and not have a mental health condition. Like, so I feel like the people who try to argue about it just being all in your head and the mind over matter and all this stuff, they're not mentally ill. It is different. You got over it because you were feeling anxiety. You don't have this thing debilitating you and like literally controlling the entirety of your life. I personally have an anxiety disorder. I've gotten better over the years. I feel like I'm definitely better at managing it now, but it's also because I'm homebound. So I feel like part of the problem is that, like, I'm not being put into certain situations anymore. So that honestly could be why, personally, for me, like, it's not as bad. But when it was at its worst, it was entirely debilitating. It stopped me in my tracks. Like, I would like literally like hide in my room. At school, I would hide in the bathroom. It was choosing things for me. It was making my decisions for me. And that's just as bad as a physical illness preventing you from leaving your house. If you have a mental illness, it can do the same thing. It prevents you from leaving your house. It prevents you from doing the things that you want to do. That in itself is disabling. The big stigma of mental illness not being an invisible illness could not be further from the truth, and is a huge stigma and still a stigma to this day. And I feel like we've definitely gotten better over the years of trying to end the stigma behind mental health conditions and stuff. But again, it's different when people aren't viewing it the same as any other physical invisible illness. Let's take this as an opportunity to drink some water. If you guys have a cozy beverage, take a sip of that. If you guys have any meds that you gotta take, go to the bathroom, do whatever y'all gotta do. We're not fucking lazy. This is the one that I hate the most. Oh yeah, like, but honestly, I feel like out of the four, you don't look sick is something that I hear far too often. And another variation of that is, oh, you look great. You look like you're doing well. There's been times where Mr. Punkster's parents have stopped by and like to say hi or drop something off, and they'll look at me and they'll be like, wow, you look like you're doing well. And I'm like, I look the exact same. What do you mean? Like, and also, just because I have my makeup all done and everything like that, just because I look good, doesn't mean that I'm feeling good. Like, even right now, like how I'm looking right now, if someone came in, if we weren't talking about this, if this was just like an average stream, like a normal day, people wouldn't know that I was sick. Because I quote unquote look good. Like, I don't look like I would be struggling. But like literally right now, my fatigue is entirely unbearable. My tremors are really bad. You can't really see it because I'm moving my hands around a lot. I'm not sitting still. So it's easy for you guys to not see that. The brain fog, I mean, it was easy for you guys to see that because, I mean, I just straight up stopped talking. So brain fog isn't exactly you can't really hide it. Like, it just happens. But like, I do have really bad brain fog today. I'm dealing with chronic pain. Like, you don't see these things. You're not going to see it at a first glance. But the thing with invisible illness is, if you pay attention, if you truly pay attention to the person and you listen to them and you hear like them talk about certain things or their experiences in life, like if you really pay attention, you will notice it. You will see it. But again, that is like if someone actually wants to pay attention to you, which is why at a first glance, randoms on the street, randoms on the internet, they aren't going to know that you're invisibly ill. And so they immediately, they close-mindedly say, like, oh, but like you don't look sick, so you must not be. And invisible illness isn't black and white. It just isn't. Like, even if you and I had the same condition, we're going to experience it very differently. There's people out there who do have similar experiences, but at the end of the day, whether it's like invisible illness in general, but like if two people have the same illnesses, you can experience it very differently because invisible illnesses and disabilities are very fluid. It's very open to different symptoms, people experiencing symptoms at like a different extreme. You know, it depends on the severity. Some people have a more severe case of a certain illness. Some people are just kind of developing the illness. So it really depends on so much. When I was on disability for my bipolar, I've been asked by coworkers if I was enjoying my vacation. Yep. That's the other thing too. Actually, that's a misconception that isn't on here, but that we can definitely add to the list. This is why, like, I have notes, but like it's also just naturally having conversations with you guys that we can discuss more and really like expand on these things. Another misconception is that people see us being homebound or taking time off or spending lots of time in bed, that like it's a vacation and that we're enjoying ourselves. They say things like, oh, I wish I could do that. Oh, you get to spend all time in bed? Oh God, that sounds so nice. I wish I could do that. Like they think that it's just you choosing not to do anything and that it's you, they picture you being homebound and being on bed rest as like a Sunday. I feel like that's the best way to put it. They view your experience as a lazy Sunday. They think that it's recharging. They think that it's just the best experience, when in all actuality, it is the total opposite. It is the absolute worst, especially if you spend days or weeks on end being bedridden or just like having to be at home, because every day feels the same. And it ultimately, how you end up feeling is it feels like life isn't sparkly anymore. You don't have that sparkle in life anymore. You're missing out on so many things that normal people, I don't like using the term normal people because that's just no one's normal, but healthy abled people, they get to experience all these things in life while we quite literally don't have a choice. They have a choice. You know, we are in bed because we don't have a choice. It's not this luxury. Spending days and weeks in bed is not a luxury. Me personally, being homebound for almost 5 years now, not a luxury. I can't remember the last time I hung out with a friend in person. I can't remember the last time. I can't go to concerts as much anymore. Like there's so many things that I want to do that I can't. This isn't an enjoyable experience, not having to work, and it's not even about not having to work. It's just I am unable to work. Not being able to work sucks. Having less financial comfortability and stability sucks. Being stuck in bed to the point where some days I can't even watch TV because of my sound sensitivity. I can't watch YouTube. I can't watch stream. I can't do anything other than lay in my bed in the dark, in the quiet, total quiet, because I can't handle any sound. Sucks. It is a struggle. You're not really living your life. And they see it like it's a choice. And so when people say things like, oh, like it's like you're on vacation, or you're, you know, like it's this enjoyable experience, it's so frustrating because it's like, dude, spend a single day in my body. Spend a single day coping with this level of chronic pain and chronic fatigue and all these other symptoms like dizziness and nausea and bloating, and you feel the furthest thing from human. I don't feel like a human being most days. I genuinely, most of the time, I feel like I am a rotting corpse and that there is poison oozing through my veins and through my organs. I would love to see someone wake up and feel the way that I feel tomorrow, because you know what? They would go straight to the hospital. They would not be able to spend a single second in my shoes, laying in bed feeling like it's just a nice day off. Not possible. I can't figure out what to do with my life because I don't know if I'll be able to handle working 40 hours. I feel so stuck. Yes. And that, again, that will also be a topic that we discuss at another time as well, is like feeling stuck in life. Listen, there are so many topics you don't even understand. This might sound like we're covering a lot, but there is so much to be discussed. There is so much that makes up the invisible illness and disability experience. There are so many things. We are going to really, really unpack so many different topics, and I'm really looking forward to it because, like, there's just so many things to talk about, and I feel like it's a cathartic experience for me. I feel like it's a very cathartic experience for other people as well. You feel seen, you feel heard, and there are things that you don't get to talk about every day because people don't just outright bring it up. You know what I mean? One of the other things that I wanted to talk about is the importance of empathy and the importance of awareness and how people can be an ally. It's important to understand invisible illnesses and disabilities because we really lack empathy from other people because of how bad it's misunderstood. Learning more about these conditions, we can better support our friends, family, and colleagues who are living with them. It's crucial to believe people when they share their experiences, even if those experiences are invisible to us. It's also about creating a more inclusive society. Workplaces, schools, and public spaces have made steps towards being more accessible for visible disabilities, but there is still a long way to go in making these spaces accessible for people with invisible conditions. This might include flexible working hours, mental health resources, or simply fostering a culture that's understanding of sick days without judgment. If you want to be an ally to people with invisible illnesses and disabilities, here are a few ways to start. Listen and validate. Believe people when they describe their symptoms or their challenges they face. And this ties in with the "but you don't look sick" comment. It goes back to that belief that they aren't believing your experience. So if you want to be a better ally and if you want to better support those around you who are invisibly ill and disabled, you need to believe what they're describing to you. You need to believe their experiences and their symptoms. You need to ask them questions about it and really understand the extent of what they're going through. And that also ties into this, which is educating yourself, learning about different invisible conditions to avoid assumptions and stereotypes. So I feel like the best way to counter, the ableist comments that we deal with on the daily basis is people believing your experience and asking questions so that they can educate themselves on why it's so harmful to say, why certain beliefs and certain thoughts are very damaging to those with invisible illnesses and disabilities. They're learning themselves, like, why those comments are harmful, and therefore they will stop saying those comments. And this is why it's so important for people to just simply sit in a conversation like this and just hear someone out for an hour. You know what I mean? I feel like an hour really isn't a long time to like sit and educate yourself on something. So again, that's also why it's important to have, a podcast like this, or even if it's not a podcast, but like just have people with platforms opening up the conversation and discussing things like this, because it can really start the domino effect of educating people on ableist terms or ableist beliefs and helping the invisible illness and disability community in stopping those mindsets. Another way that you can help those of us who are invisibly ill and disabled is to be patient and be flexible. There are a lot of times where the plans that we have with you might change at the last minute due to flare-ups or mental health needs. And the best thing that you can do is be supportive of that and understand that it's out of our control, and that the reason we are canceling doesn't have anything to do with you, and it has everything to do with our body constantly calling the shots. So if you can understand that and be a little more flexible and just be prepared for us to sometimes cancel at the last minute, then that will be super helpful, because a lot of us deal with a tremendous amount of guilt. I know me personally, anytime to this day, like it's been years of me having to say no to family members, and I still feel guilty every single time I have to say I can't make something because I feel like I'm letting someone down. And that's the other thing that we'll talk about another day is the tie between living with invisible illness and disability, and it like basically causing mental health problems and developing mental health problems because of it. um, and so there are a lot of times where I have so much guilt that it almost makes me feel very depressed. Like I get really down in the dumps because I feel like I'm the problem, and obviously it's not our fault. We didn't ask for this, you know. We didn't ask to be so sick and to have um you know, the inconsistency that comes with our symptoms, to the point where we have to cancel on things last minute. I've had to last minute cancel going to weddings, and when I said no, I felt the disappointment. You can't deny the disappointment that you can feel from other people when you say no. And it's the most heartbreaking thing, because we obviously don't want to let people down, but we also don't have a choice. So, to be a better ally and to be a better support system for someone who's invisible or disabled, and canceling those plans at the last minute, just please keep an open mind and understand that this isn't our choice. And if we had it our way, we wouldn't cancel. We would do all the things, but sometimes we just can't. Like we wake up every day and we don't know how we're going to feel. I can have plans a week from now. I can do all the resting. I can try to prepare my body, but at the end of the day, I might wake up and suddenly I'm having a huge flare up. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes it doesn't get triggered by something we do or don't do. Sometimes it just happens. It's a very unpredictable life, and it's very, very frustrating. So having people who understand that and can be supportive of that and not make us feel guilty is huge. You can't schedule flare ups. That's not how it works. Thank you. Yes. I'm not gonna open up my agenda and be like, you know what? This day sounds perfect for a flare up. No. There's times where I get really lucky and I don't flare up on a day where I have plans to do something. And there's times where, like I just mentioned, like I will have a special stream planned out, and it will be like a month in advance, and I will do all the things to try and prepare my body and do all the resting and whatever, and avoid certain things, like avoid going out, not have dates with Mr. Punkster, and like literally just say no to everything, because I'm like, I have this thing and I really need to feel good for it. I need to make sure my symptoms are at a low. The day will come, and sorry, like I just have to struggle through it, or I have to cancel it altogether. And that's the most frustrating thing about being, for me personally, being a chronically ill and disabled content creator, is I can have all these plans. I can like have collabs with people set up and stuff, and it'll all go out the window. And then sometimes it's incredibly hard to reschedule with those people as well. So there's times where I've had full plans to like collab with other people or have other opportunities, and my illness gets in the way, and then I can't do any of them. And it's very frustrating. So the last point in how to be a better ally is to speak up. A lot of the times when it comes to invisible illness and disability advocacy, we're the ones doing all the work. And living life as an invisibly ill and disabled person is already exhausting. Having to advocate for ourselves on top of it and do all of the work and try to make these changes by ourselves is incredibly exhausting. And we feel so alone in it. So if you help us advocate for policies and changes that make workplaces, schools, and communities more accommodating for disabilities, visible or not, then you're taking even just a little bit of the workload off of us. Because, I mean, just naturally in an ableist society on top of that, our voices are very, very suppressed. It's actually, for me, I've had a tremendously hard time finding other invisibly ill and disabled individuals online using their voices, because it feels like outright that we are just suppressed, that like nobody wants to listen to us. And that has been the hardest thing in me that I've noticed for me personally in becoming an advocate and doing all these projects to help advocate for and amplify the voices of other invisibly ill and disabled people is nobody gives a shit. That's the reality. Nobody cares about disabled people. That's the reality that we live in. That's the reality for centuries and years and years and years, like history. If you look at all the history of disability, not too much has changed. We've had some wins, but at the end of the day, it feels like people are constantly shutting us down, and we're living in a world where people don't even want us here. And it's absolutely devastating, and it feels like we don't have anyone in our corner willing to support us, willing to take the time to listen to us. So it is so important, not only for us to use our voices to advocate and advocate for better policies and changes, but also amplifying the voices of other people's experiences. But it's even more important for abled and healthy people to do that, to sit and listen to us and listen to our experiences and help advocate for those changes, because the government doesn't care about us. They don't. Time and time again, they prove that. Society doesn't care about us. What proves that is people doing initiatives like this, and people actually don't take the time to listen. So even if you just show up here and you listen, and even if you just share this podcast episode around and say, hey, I learned a lot from this, like really take the time to listen, you're doing something. Like, even if you just do the smallest thing to help advocate for us, it means the world to us. So if you have the capability, listen to someone around you, ask them what their experience is like, help advocate just for them personally, help someone. If you help one person, you're helping more of us than you realize. We need more people in our corner who are healthy and abled and are willing to listen to us. It doesn't mean you have to be chronically online and posting all of these resources and stuff, although that would be game changer as well. And, I obviously encourage you to take the time to do that. But even if you just help someone around you, or, help advocate for them if they are advocates online, share their stuff personally. Because you never know who's watching or who's listening or who's going to take the time to click on that post or watch that video or listen to the podcast and reach more people and have more people be a little more inclusive and giving us more opportunities to speak up and use our voices and advocate for ourselves and educate other people as well. When you help someone, you help everyone. I love that. I love that, Spence. That's amazing. Honestly, I gave up being an advocate because of that reason. That's the thing too. It's such an exhausting thing for us because inherently our existences are exhausting and our experiences and life is just exhausting. We end up just giving up because we, time and time again, get shown that nobody cares about us. And there's just so much that we deal with and so much that heartbreak that we have to endure because we see people who don't care. We hear comments like, you don't look sick. It's very important for other people to share our experiences, just as important as it is for us to use our voices. But at the end of the day, it is exhausting living like this. And it can just be very tiring, fighting and fighting and fighting for change when nobody's listening and it feels like nobody cares. So if you yourself are abled and healthy and you've gotten this far and you've listened, just know that I personally really appreciate it. The people who are watching right now who are chronically ill or disabled, they really appreciate it. And just know that it only takes one person to try and make the world of a difference. So help the people around you, listen to someone talk about their experiences, and just believe disabled people when they tell you that they can't do something, because it's in that disbelief that is ultimately the problem with why ableism is still a thing. And it's because there are too many people who just jump to the conclusion that we're faking everything. But if people even just took a second to listen to us and hear our experiences and how it actually in such a negative way can impact the overall like every single thing in our life, in every way, shape, and form, it affects everything. And if you just believe us and listen to us and realize that we're not really living our lives most of the time, then, you know, if you believe us, then we can actually start educating people and getting to the bottom of how we can better support disabled people in society and make it more inclusive and make it something that we don't feel suppressed anymore and we don't feel like we don't matter. Invisible illnesses and disabilities are more common than we might think. And the more we talk about them, the more we can create a world that understands and supports the people living with them. If you found this episode helpful, or if you have any experiences or thoughts to share, I would love to hear from you. If you can leave a comment below and let me know something else that you want to hear, if you want to share your experience, and just support this podcast in any way so that we can keep having conversations like this and educating other people and bringing awareness to these things, I would really appreciate it. I will be making a Google form for people to leave suggestions, but you can also leave it in the comments underneath the YouTube video. And just remember that empathy and understanding goes a long way. And again, if you can help us advocate for other disabled and visibly ill individuals, then we can create a more inclusive society. Just remember to practice empathy, keep an open mind, and listen to disabled and invisibly ill individuals. Other than that, thank you for listening. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen today. If you want to see more of my content, obviously I stream here on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, typically around 1 to 2 p.m. Sometimes that changes. You can go follow me over on YouTube. I'll be posting this on there as well. Twitter, you can go follow me over on Twitter. I'm trying not to be overly active on there right now, just with all the changes that are going on and stuff, but you can go follow me over on Twitter. I do have a Blue Sky account, if you want to go follow me on there, and Instagram. I also have Instagram, so you can find me on all the social media platforms, and TikTok. There's too many social media platforms now, it's hard to keep up. But yeah, I do a lot of invisible illness and disability awareness on all those other platforms as well. And just talking about my personal experiences and stuff. And yeah, I love to be social. I love to talk with you guys and stuff. So Blue Sky and Twitter are definitely probably the best places to find me right now, because I love to yap, as you can tell. Or else, why else would I have started a podcast? You know. I love you guys so much. Make sure to drink more water today, and take care of yourselves. And if you got a BEDROT, then make sure you take the time to do that, because you deserve to take care of yourself.